Now, jig fishing, what is jig fishing? Jig fishing, it comes in there are several different ways to define jig fishing. Most people know of jig fishing as a pig and jig. The jig is up front, which normally is normally a silicone type skirt with a rubber pig on the back. And that's how it gets the name jig and pig. This is the jig with the silicone skirt, and when you attach this to it, then it becomes a pig. And the reason why they call it the pig, before they ever developed the plastic pig, they used to actually use live, well, I won't say live, but actual pork rind. And by using the pork rind, that's how I got the name pig and jig. But it's very, very effective. The key thing that I want you to understand is there are certain times of the year and there are certain conditions when the jig will work best for you. Don't get so confused, don't become so one-dimensional that you're going to fish the pig and jig all the time, or you're going to fish the plastic worm or the spinnerbait or any of the lures that I use all of the time. And that is the biggest problem that most fishermen have. Once they start using one type of lure and they catch a few fish, then they're hooked for the rest of their life, and it's very hard to get them to use something else. Sure, I want you to catch fish on this jig, but again, I don't want you to become hooked on it and think that it's going to catch fish under all conditions. So you're saying, well, great, when do I catch fish on jigs? The jig can be used in rocks, it can be used in trees, it can be swimmed across grass beds, lily pads. Just about anywhere you catch fish, you can catch them on a jig. But the thing is, when do I fish it? Spring of the year is an excellent time to throw a jig. Reason being, normally during the spring of the year, that's when your crawfish hatch out. And when that crawfish hatch out, bass will go after those crawfish. And that is one of the best times to use it. Now, it doesn't say you can't use it in the summertime and you can't use it in the wintertime. When it first turns cold, and it's really cold, the water starts really getting cold, around trees, it's a blowdown, stumps, any type of real serious structure, you can catch fish on a jig and pig. Now, there are other lures that can also be defined as a jig fishing. And that is, for an example, a tube bait. A tube bait is just what it says. It's a tube of plastic, rubber plastic, with the skirts, or the little tentacles rather, on the end of it, with a slip. And this, don't get confused, this is not the only way you can fish it, but most people fish it this way. Use a slip sinker on probably about a 4-aught hook. Put the hook through the tube bait and just gently stick it back into the skin of the tube bait. And the reason why, that makes it weedless. Now, well, you say, well, when do I fish that? Well, it can be fished in the spring of the year, and I keep going back to the spring of the year because that's when fish move into the shallows. And this is certainly a shallow, in most cases, a shallow water type lure. The spring of the year, when fish go on bed, is the time when you want to use a tube bait. When they come off bed and they're in the treetops, or just before they go on bed, they're in the treetops, that is the time when you want to use a tube bait. A tube bait comes in all sizes, all shapes and colors. For an example, now that's nothing more than a tube bait, but look what they've done. They modified it. They got little arms on the side, and they got the dangling or the curly tail tentacles on the end, which in essence gives it more action when you're flipping it into grass, brush, trees, rocks, just about anywhere you can fish this lure. But again, the time that I would use a tube bait would be in the spring of the year when the fish are just going on bed. I would also use it after they have come off bed, because that is the time when a lot of your fish are going to move into your treetop chasing the fresh hatchlings. I'm going to say it one more time because I want you to understand that the tube bait is an excellent lure. Spring of the year, when the fish are on bed, when the fish are on bed, you can throw this lure right into a bed. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more because there's some special keys that you have to understand if you're going to try to catch a fish off bed. Normally, you're going to fish for fish on bed in clear water because it's very important if you're going to use a tube bait that you be able to see the fish actually pick up the lure to try to move it off its bed. Now, you say, what is a bed? Well, a bass bed is normally going to be found in the back of coves where there's some form of sand. Normally, you're not going to find it where there's a whole lot of rocks unless they're able to move those rocks around and make them a nice little round area, which they call a bed. And they're very easy to spot. They're going to be much lighter than the surrounding bottom where they're located. It's just like a light spot, like a bowl. If you look very close, you'll find the fish swimming around this light area. And that's going to be the early part of the spring. Normally, especially if you're fishing here in the south, normally around the end of May, the fish will be moving off, well, actually about the latter part of April, the fish will have moved off the beds and you won't be able to catch them, but you're going to have to use these things when they're on bed. Again, don't get so stuck on that they only work on bed because they will work in treetops, they'll work in brush, and it's when the fish are in the shallow. All right? Now, if you're going to fish bed fish, you want to go with a tube bait, one that has a lot of sparkle. I like the firecracker, but the smoke with the red works extremely well. And if you want to dress it up, just dye the tentacles on the end with a chartreuse dye. That makes it even more attractive. Another key thing to using a tube bait or any type of jig is the presentation. Now, what I'm using here is a flipping stick. And what it means by that is that you want to just flip it right into your structure. You want to make a soft presentation. All right? Okay. Now, you notice I threw that tube bait right down beside a fallen tree. In the spring of the year, you're going to find a lot of big bass in the tree. All right? That's called pitching. Now, flipping is a little bit different. Flipping means I'm going to hold the lure in my hand. I'm just going to flip it out there, or you can hold it like this. Hold just like this, and just get right over your structure and flip it right into the structure that you're fishing.
We'll be right back with more Angler's Paradise.
Let's talk about the different types of lures, when you will use them, why do color make a difference. This is called a root beer. Some may want to call it a cinnamon. It's a light colored lure. It's a jig. Clear water is where I would use this one. Clear water. Just remember, your light colored lures are going to work best in clear water. Okay?
Count to 5.
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
All right. The root beer or your cinnamon type colors or jigs are best used in clear water. Just remember, they're best used in clear water. But if you get confused, say, well, I don't really know what color I should flip, pitch, or cast, go with the black and blue with the blue chunk. Now, that is a universal color. It'll work in any color water, stained or clear. But if I was fishing, personally, if I was fishing clear water, this color would be my choice. If I was fishing stained water, this color would be my choice. But it's not to say that this color won't work in both. It seemed to be the most universal color of all the jigs that's out there. It's called the black and blue. Some anglers won't use nothing but a black and blue, regardless of what color water they're fishing. Really simple. Now you got all different kind. If you're fishing around docks, rocks, and you're fishing for spotted bass or smallmouths, go with a small. Downsize. It's gonna make all the difference in the world. Now check this color out. You got a lot of specks in it. Sometimes that makes a difference. So when you're fishing pig and jig, you have to try a lot of different colors sometimes to get the one that they're gonna bite best. Now, if you've tried several different colors, the cinnamon, you tried the black and blue, and maybe some other favorite color that you have, and you haven't caught fish, it's time then to switch to another lure. Remember, when the fish are on the pig and jig, they're on it. One other thing I want you to understand, hear that rattle in there? Now, I like to rattle, especially if I'm fishing waters kind of murky or stained or even muddy. But if I'm fishing extremely clear water, the fish not gonna have a problem finding it. They're gonna feel the vibration when it first hit the water, and I won't use a rattle. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's very, very important. It'll make all the difference in the world for you to catch fish or not catch fish. Remember, the rattle is for your murky, stained, or muddy water. Without a rattle, you're fishing clear water. Simple as that. Red. I love to use red, any type of lure with red in it in the spring of the year, because when the crawfish first hatch out, they have a reddish color. So early spring, during the first part of the hatching of the crawfish, go with a lure with some red in it. That makes all the difference. Matter of fact, you notice I even use a crawfish trail on the end of it to make sure that the bass knows what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to entice him to hit a lure with that simulates crawfish. And red seems to work best in the early part of the spring. And don't get confused that I keep talking about spring. You can flip, if you're in an area where there's a lot of structure, you can flip in the middle of the summer, you can flip in the fall of the year. I've even caught huge bass, and that's when you'll catch a lot of big bass in the wintertime throwing a pig and jig, because it slows down. It slows down the bite. And there are not a whole lot of different creatures in the water that a bass can feed on in the wintertime, with the exception of actual bait fish or crawfish. That is the basic diet of a bass during the real cold times of the season. I certainly hope that you've gotten a much better understanding on how to fish pig and jig. It's certainly been my pleasure to try to teach the technique of using pig and jig. But I tell you what, in order for you to be great at it, you have to fish this lure yourself. After you've fished and come up with a few techniques of your own, write me, email me. Tell me some of the things that you found out about pig and jigs. See you next week, right here on Angler's Paradise.